You could be forgiven for not knowing the name of Guyuk Khan. Guyuk, as Great Khan of the Mongol Empire since 1246, makes a poor figure compared to the likes of his grandfather Genghis Khan, his father Ogadai, or cousins Mongke and Kublai. Few medieval writers had much good to say about him, and his successor Mongke ensured Guyuk's legacy was tarnished. Yet, the reign of Guyuk was a turning point in the history of the Mongol Empire, the transition of the Khanate from the line of Ogadai to the descendants of Tolui. I'm your host David, and this is the Kings and Generals podcast, Ages of Conquest. Guyuk was about 40 years old when he became Great Khan of the Mongol Empire in the summer 1246. The oldest son of Ogadai Khan and his wife, Torogene, not much is known of him prior to his ascension. He seems to have had little administrative experience, and only in the Great Western Campaign does Guyuk come to notice. There, he performed well, though friction developed between him and the senior prince of the campaign, Jochi's son Batu. Guyuk and his cousin Mongke left with their troops before the campaign reached Hungary, but did not reach Mongolia before Ogadai's death in December 1241. After Ogadai's death, his widow Torogene began orchestrating support for Guyuk's election to succeed his father. While Ogadai at various points, and various states of sobriety, had named several of his sons and a grandson as heirs, he never seems to have made such an explicit statement in regards to Guyuk. The Mongols did not practice primogeniture, so it was hardly a sure matter that, as the eldest, Guyuk had any right to succeed Ogadai. Neither did Guyuk seem to exert much effort for the nomination. The historical sources depict this as the efforts of Torogene, Guyuk almost a bystander to the matter. Despite this, Torogene succeeded at quite some financial and personal cost, falling out with another son, Khoten, and a grandson, Shiramun, who also wanted the throne. So what was the character of the new monarch? Raised under the close supervision of the Atabeg Kadak, the Atabeg being a Turkic institution to train young men in the art of war, the fact that Kadak was a Christian seems to have instilled an affinity for the religion in Guyuk, though he never converted. As we will explain later, Guyuk's reputation was ripped apart by his successors. In the official accounts, he is generally depicted as suffering from some chronic, unidentified illness, engaging in daily drinking binges like his father, and generally shown as a poor monarch more interested in debauchery than ruling. Sources outside the empire, as stressed by historian Hodong Kim, provide a more balanced view. An important account is that of John de Plano Carpini, a European friar sent as an envoy from the Pope to the Mongol Empire, who attended Guyuk's coronation in 1246. His account, uncolored by the intrigues which emerged between the later Chinggisids, shows a strict, stern man who did not engage in frivolity, interested more so in continuing his father's legacy, centralizing and expanding the empire. Guyuk, as we will see, probably was an alcoholic and suffering from illness, though neither was a trait unique to him among the Mongol princes. Yet that he was also trying to restabilize the empire after Torogene's regency and rein in local princes used to less imperial oversight better explains the actions of his reign. Keeping that in mind, let us see what our boy Guyuk got up to. Torogene had bitterly campaigned to place her son on the throne, in the process making several enemies, granting positions to favorites, and in many respects, unintentionally weakening the central government of the empire. With her close confidant, the Shia Central Asian Fatima, she attempted to arrest Ogadai's chancellor, the Nestorian Christian Chinkai, the head of the Secretariat for China, Mahmud Yalavach, Yalavach's son, and the head of the Central Asian Secretariat, Masud Beg, and other appointees who stood against tax farming and exploitation. Chinkai and Mahmud Yalavach fled to Khoten, Torogene's son who also desired the throne, while Masud Beg fled to the court of Batu in the western steppe. Others, less fortunate, were caught and killed. To raise the necessary funds for the bribes and gifts to secure Guyuk's nomination, Turgeni needed rapacious tax farmers, and thus appointed Abd al-Rahman to the head of the China Secretariat. Abd al-Rahman, as we covered in the previous episode, had essentially put all of Mongol-occupied North China in debt, and there is no reason to doubt that his efforts under Turgeni were any less greedy. Other favors and positions were awarded to secure loyalties and remove figures who stood in Turgeni's path. The picture is of a destabilization of the empire's bureaucracy, a general weakening of the central government over the corners of the empire. Batu, situated in what is now modern Russia and Kazakhstan, began to emerge in this period as an immensely powerful figure. With the death of Chagatai in 1242, Batu was considered the Aka, the senior prince of the Chinggisid lineage, and well outside Turgeni's influence. The cracks in the Mongol Empire were starting to form. On his ascension in 1246, Guyuk's main goal was reversing these trends. Just before his official enthronement, Guyuk had a reconciliation with his brother Khoten, who had fallen deathly ill. Khoten was convinced that Fatima, their mother's confidant, was a witch and had cursed him and was the cause of the strife under Turgeni, or at least a useful scapegoat. Getting Guyuk to promise to avenge him, Khoten soon died. As he had given shelter to Chinkai and Mahmud Yalovach, these experienced figures entered Guyuk's camp and were reinstated to their old positions, and were a major influence on Guyuk's drive to centralization. Guyuk moved quickly on Chinkai's urging. After Guyuk's election, Turgeni fell ill, and within 2 to 3 months had passed away. Before she did, though, Guyuk made sure to dismantle her entire support network. Abd al-Rahman, the money-hungry tax collector of China, was captured and executed. Offices and privileges granted since Ogedai's death, Yarligs in Mongolian, were declared void. The greatest strike to Turgeni was against Fatima. The sources depict them as dear friends, and some modern online commentators have suspected the relationship was even romantic, but nothing can be proven in that regard. When Guyuk's envoys came demanding Turgeni hand over Fatima, Turgeni refused. In response, Guyuk sent an armed escort with orders not to leave without her. Under armed guard, Fatima was taken captive, bound, starved, humiliated, and under torture, forced to admit to charges of witchcraft, a crime punishable by death. Her family and supporters were killed, but witchcraft itself needed a more severe punishment. All of Fatima's orifices were sewn shut, then she was rolled up in felt and, still living, thrown into a river. Turgeni was heartbroken, mortified at what she had created, and soon died. Fatima, on Guyuk's orders, took the blame for the mismanagement of the previous years, sparing any official condemnations of his own mother. The executions did not stop there. You'll recall in the previous episode how we mentioned Temugay, the youngest brother of Chinggis Khan, and his only surviving full brother, had attempted to seize power during Turgeni's regency. Though he had abandoned this, it was not forgotten. An official investigation was launched, headed by Orda, Batu's older brother, and Monke, the oldest of Tolui's children, and thus senior members of their respective branches. Found guilty of treason, Temugay Ochgin was executed. Few details of the manner are known, and we can suppose information was suppressed. Also tried was Al-Altan, Chinggis Khan's favorite daughter, who was married into the Wagyr royal family. At Ogedai's final feast, Al-Altan had been present and argued with her brother regarding imperial encroachment on her territory. Ogedai was dead by next morning. Al-Altan was accused of poisoning Ogedai and executed by Guyuk's right-hand man, El-Jigideh. Guyuk also intervened elsewhere. On Chagatai's death in 1242, he was succeeded by his grandson, Kara Hulegu. Guyuk had Kara Hulegu removed and appointed his friend and drinking buddy, Yesu Monke, to replace him, putting a more pliant individual in charge of the Chagatai territories. He meddled even further afield. After the victory of Kusedag in 1243, the Seljuks of Anatolia were Mongol vassals, and a dispute had emerged over who would hold the Sultanate after the death of Kayhusra II, his sons Kilich Arslan IV or Kaikos II. As Kilich Arslan made the journey to Mongolia to attend Guyuk's coronation, Guyuk appointed him the Seljuk Sultan. In the Kingdom of Georgia, there was a dispute as to who would succeed the late Queen Rusudan. Batu wanted Rusudan's son David to succeed her, while the local commander Baiju wanted Rusudan's nephew, also named David, on the Georgian throne. Guyuk's solution was to divide the kingdom between the two of them. Militarily, Guyuk wanted to resume the conquests after their general hiatus under Torogene. Venerable Subutai was sent on his final campaign alongside Chagan Noyan against the Song dynasty, though this was a brief affair. El-Jigadai was sent to the Middle East with an army, and threatening letters were sent to the Caliph in Baghdad. Guyuk wanted to finally subjugate Europe in what was effectively a massive pincer movement against the remaining independent powers on the western end of the continent. A demand for submission was sent with John de Plano Carpini to take back to the Pope, and in autumn 1247, Guyuk and his army set out. This was something of a two birds, one stone situation. While Guyuk's overall plan was to attack Europe, this brought him close to the territory of Batu. Batu would either have to assist the army, thus demonstrating his submission to the Khan, or he would be destroyed. This was not an attack on the Jochids, though. Guyuk got on fine with Batu's older brother, Orda, and Guyuk may have intended to replace Batu with Orda, as he had done in the Chagatai Khanate with Kara Hulegu and Yesu Monke. Batu was forewarned of the possibility from an unlikely source, Tului's widow, Sorkaktani Beki. Alerted to the danger, Batu prepared an army and moved eastwards, sending his brother Shiban ahead to determine Guyuk's intentions. It seemed the Mongol Empire was veering dangerously close to civil war. This was averted as in April 1248, Guyuk Khan suddenly died a week's march west of Beshbalik. The timing is convenient, and medieval sources share rumors of Guyuk being poisoned by Batu via his brother Shiban. But, as we noted earlier, the sources also mention Guyuk in chronically poor health worsened by his heavy drinking. If true, Guyuk was hardly the first, nor the last, Mongol prince undone from alcoholism and its associated risks. But the timing was rather convenient for Batu, who seems to have been a little too prepared to jump on the opportunity. Batu immediately sent messengers to Guyuk's widow, Ogul Kaimish, urging her to take the regency with the assistance of the able Chinkai until a Kurultai could declare Guyuk's successor. In the meantime, Batu proposed a Kurultai to be held at a more central location called Alakamak. The precise location is unclear, but seems to have been somewhere south of Lake Balkhash, rather near to Batu's territory. The suggestion was met with uproar among the families of Chagatai and Ogadai, the traditional homeland of Chinggis Khan. The Onon Karulan region of northern Mongolia had to be where the Khan was decided. Support for Batu's suggestion came from his lineage, the Jochids, and what at first seems unlikely allies, the Tuluids. To explain this, we need to step back a few years. Tului, the fourth son of Chinggis Khan and Borte, had married a Kariat woman, a niece of Togrul Ong Khan, named Sorkaktani Beki. On Tului's death in 1232, Sorkaktani became the head of that branch of the family. The sources across the board agree that Sorkaktani was highly intelligent, diplomatically and commercially skilled. She was diplomatically skilled enough to decline, without issue, Ogadai's offer for her to marry his son Guyuk after Tului's death. Instead, she remained independent, inheriting Tului's lands and making off very well in the allotment of appanages in 1236. She spent the following years fostering her territories, making ties with merchants and amassing quite the fortune. Even before Tului's death, he was often away on campaign, leaving her to the rearing of their 4 children, Monke, Kublai, Helegu, and Arik Boke, 4 names we'll get to know very well in the following episodes. Teaching them to read and write Mongolian, about administration and leadership, she groomed them for leadership. She also made ties abroad. One of her sisters, Ibaka, had been married to Chinggis Khan, while another was married to Jochi, and though she bore him no sons, it allowed her to make contact with his sons from other wives and form a good relationship with Batu. And then she waited. When Guyuk moved his army westwards, Suraktani was quick to have messengers contact Batu. Batu, concerned with his own autonomy, prepared for the worst. While we can offer no proof if they actually conspired to kill Guyuk, or simply took advantage of the situation as it developed, either way, they deftly handled what followed. The combination of the wealth of Batu and Suraktani, and their tremendous influence, made them a dangerous pair, one which outplayed their political rivals. As the Kurultai at Ala Kamak looked to be going ahead, Suraktani likely felt she compared very well to Guyuk's widow and the regent, Ogul Kaimash. Nothing is known of Ogul Kaimash until she was suddenly thrust into the regency. Like Turagene, she was originally from the Merkit tribe, awarded to Guyuk when both were young. She bore Guyuk 2 sons, Kucha and Naku, and may have been the mother of his 3 known daughters. Unlike Turagene and Suraktani, Ogul Kaimash had no network of carefully selected allies to rely upon, and was completely unprepared for the role of imperial regent. She's described as generally ignoring the requirements of governing the empire, spending her time with shamans and merchants. Dismissive of Batu's efforts to organize the Kurultai, it seems she was under the impression that the succession would of course go to one of her sons, while also believing it could not go forth without her presence. Because of this, she also seems to have failed to undertake the extensive gift-giving necessary to help smooth along one's nomination. The Kurultai at Ala Kamak was held in 1250. While it saw strong attendance from the houses of Jochi and Tului, few Chagatieds or Ogadids bothered to show up, refusing to see it as legitimate. Ogul Kaimash was not present, and her sons Kucha and Naku briefly stopped in before departing and leaving a representative, Temur Noyan, to vote for them. As Kara Hulegu, the deposed grandson of Chagatai and one of Ogadai's sons from a concubine, Kadan, showed up, Batu could say that all branches of the family were represented, and therefore was perfectly legal. In the absence of Kucha and Naku, the only candidate who fielded enough respect was Monke, though we can suspect it was engineered to choose him either way. Monke was the eldest son of Tului and Suraktani, a fit, well-respected military leader who had fought well during the Great Western Campaign. Monke and his mother were friendly to Batu and made an agreement to essentially make Batu ruler of the western half of the empire. Hence, Batu ensured Monke had the Jochid vote. This was by no means uncontested. The House of Ogadai believed that Chinggis Khan had meant for rule of the empire to stay within their line. Batu, Suraktani, and her children presented various arguments against this. One was that the Ogadids, through their actions such as the executions of Temugay and Al-Altan, or by choosing to elect Guyuk to succeed Ogadai instead of his grandsons Shiramun, had voided this. Another was that, in Mongolian tradition, the youngest son inherited the father's property. As Tului was Chinggis Khan's youngest son, that therefore made his line the rightful heirs. The fact that Monke was not in turn Tului's youngest son was thoughtfully glossed over. Generous bribery did much to convince the naysayers present, and in the end, even the representative left by Kucha and Naku voted to elect Monke as Great Khan. The assembly agreed to hold a Kurultai in Mongolia as soon as possible to confirm it. That an election went ahead without their presence sent the Ogadids into a tailspin. They had failed to declare their own candidate in the first place. Kucha and Naku each wanted to be Khan, while their mother Ogul Kamish seems to have actually picked Ogadai's grandson Shiramun as her candidate. At each other's throats, the three actually formed their own courts in opposition to each other. Government at the highest level ground to a halt. The minister Chinkai said to have been left in the wind, as none of these courts listened to him. Ogul Kamish tried to raise funds for a Quirltai. Like Guyuk, she only paid merchants in drafts rather than, actual payment, and increased irregular acquisitions on the sedentary population. Even nomads saw their taxes increase. Normally every 1 in 100 horses was paid in tax, but in 1250, this increased to 1 in every 10. An embassy from King Louis IX of France brought a red scarlet tent as gift for Ogul Kamish, which she took around to claim she had just garnered the submission of the King of France. It was all for naught. In the summer 1251, the Quirltai was held by the Caroline River, where Monke was formally enthroned at a lavish ceremony. Ogul Kamish and her son Kucha did not attend. Naku did in the company of Shiramun and an army hidden inside large gurs mounted on carts. They were going to arrive late and ambush the new Khan in the middle of feasting. Or they would have if not for a lost camel. A member of Monke's Keshig, a falconer, was in search of a camel which had wandered off when he ended up in the camp of Naku and Shiramun. There, he stopped to help in repairing a broken cart, which he noticed was full of weapons and armor, something one simply did not bring to a Quirltai. Politely excusing himself, he was said to have ran 3 days' distance in one to reach the new Khan. The sources present Monke refusing to believe members of his family would march against him. We can dismiss this entirely. The possibility of such a counter-effort had to have been anticipated from the beginning, and the fact that Monke immediately had an armed company under his right-hand man, Mengesser, on standby to send against them speaks to that. Mengesser and his men apprehended Naku and Shiramun and dispersed his force. Monke needed to begin his reign with clearing the board of enemies, on a scale beyond even what Guyuk had done. Kucha was ordered to come to Monke, and only reluctantly agreed. Ogul Kamish refused to come, calling Monke's messengers traitors for having taken the rule from the line of Ogadai. They returned with an armed escort, taking her captive with her hands stitched together in rawhide. Along with Shiramun's mother, they were taken to the camp of Sorkak Tani. There, they were beaten with burning brands until they confessed to the charges of witchcraft. As Sorkak Tani had fallen ill about this time, this accusation for those assembled may have felt legitimate. Put on trial by Mengesser, now chief judge of the empire, Ogul Kamish was stripped naked and humiliated, but defiant. "How can anyone else look upon a body that only an emperor has seen?" she told the court. She was found guilty, then rolled up in felt and thrown into the Caroline River, though spared having her orifices sewn shut. Her sons fared better, as Shiramun's chief commander was tortured into saying the princes were innocent of the treason. Kucha was forced to live basically within sight of Karakoram, while Naku and Shiramun were sent to the front lines in China. Guyuk's man, Al-Jigade, was punished for the execution of Al-Altan, his sons caught and their mouths filled with stones until they died. Al-Jigade was captured and sent to Batu, who either boiled him alive or cut off his feet and head. Buri, a grandson of Chagatai and friend of Guyuk, was put to death by Batu, while Yesu Monke, the prince Guyuk had placed in charge of the Chagatais, was executed and replaced by Kara Helugu, who had originally held the position. Guyuk's Atabeg, Kadak, was also captured and killed. The Wagyur Idikut was put to death by his own brother on Monke's orders. Even the able and long-serving Chinkai was killed, an old enemy Danishmand Hajib allowed to take out a grudge upon him. This purge continued until the line of Ogadai had been pruned and their lands confiscated. Only a few princes, those who had sided with Möngke or were too young, such as Kaidu, the future foe of Kublai, survived on much reduced territories. The Ulus of Ogadai essentially ceased to exist, most of its territory given to the Jochids, central government, or Tuluids. The Chagatai Khanate fared better, but saw a change in leadership and loss of several princes. This was the Tuluid Revolution, a massive transformation in the Mongol Empire. The switching of the ruling line from that of Ogadai to Tului, the near eradication of the line of Ogadai, and effective division of the empire between Batu and Möngke marked a radical transformation in the composition of the empire. Möngke and the lines of his brothers wrote official histories to justify the switch to their rule, and here we see the ravaging of the reputations of Torgene, Guyuk, and Ogul Kaimash. Sorkaktani died shortly after Möngke's accession, and unlike Torgene and Ogul Kaimash, she passed away on good terms with her son, having seen him elevated to the highest of positions. Nevertheless, it was in part to her efforts that the empire was placed on a path to fragmentation. Deep-seated grudges were now set among the lines, and the unity that Chinggis Khan had fought so fiercely to achieve was cracking. In the meantime, Möngke was going to lead the empire in another massive phase of expansion, so be sure to subscribe to the Kings and Generals podcast, and to continue helping us bring you more outstanding content, please visit our Patreon at www.patreon.com/kingsandgenerals. Thank you for listening, and we will catch you on the next one.